the immigrant population, which in their case is mostly Islamic, come in with a birth rate of 3, 4, 5, 6 kids per woman. And over a few short generations, their descendants overcome the native population. And as such, if they have not integrated properly, which we know, there's a lot of integration issues in Europe and Canada as well, well, it can lead to a democratic shift in the government. I mean, without a revolution, without any armed conflict, just through utilizing the democratic institutions and people being able to vote, they can vote in a complete different form of government.
Elliot Daigneault, my favorite Frenchman, live from a tiki bar somewhere in Oahu. How you doing, my brother?
I'm doing amazing. I should be getting my tequila sunrise in no time. So if you see it arrive, don't ask any questions.
Yeah, dude, I love the background. I was like, yo, bro, where are you? Like, are you at a wellness retreat? Like, what's going on?
Yeah. You know what? The options are so limited. And I was like, what do I put? What do I put that looks okay? The only reason I have a background, by the way, is because I'm using like a big studio light, and it's creating a shadow behind me that I hate. So I'm like, fuck it, let's go to the tiki bar instead.
Well, my brother, I am so glad to have you back today. I admittedly have not been paying attention to anything going on in this country, so you're going to have to fill me in. I listen to the Right Call podcast every week. You guys are one of my 2 favorite news shows in this country, the only place that I go to get news from. Literally, if I want to know what's actually happening, I search out yourself. And in late terms of Payment and Scar, you guys are, almost daily listening for me. Whenever there's a new episode, I'm on it. And so, Trump, let's start with Trump's UN speech. I don't know if you saw it.
Yeah, a little bit of it. Well, I saw the fact that I think the UN tried to sabotage him.
Okay, yeah, let's start there. Like, what were your thoughts on that? Break it down for the listeners, what happened and why you think they were sabotaging it.
Well, I mean, the Secret Services opened up an investigation, no lie. Apparently, there were 2 incidents. First of all, there's a video of Trump and Melania going to an escalator to climb on top of the building, I guess, or to go to the next floor. And the very second he steps on the escalator, it just stops. It freezes. So he had to walk up. Not a big deal. I mean, it could have just been a bug, a glitch, whatever. But then, in the middle of his speech, the teleprompter in front of the entire UN Council, the teleprompter just stopped working. So he was forced to read. Again, not a big deal. But those 2 little incidents was enough for the Secret Service to open an investigation and see, was there someone or some people within the UN trying to sabotage the president of the US? And that would not surprise me. I mean, we've seen it. We've seen some rogue motherfuckers trying to undermine this guy time and time and time again. So, yeah, I don't know, man. I thought it was funny, but turns out whoever was trying to prevent him from giving a 15-minute speech turned it into a 55 minutes ramble about how shit the UN is. So, I mean, if you don't keep Trump within parameters, he's going to start going. And I think that was even funnier that way.
He really is. He's like an autistic toddler, right? Like, you got to kind of corral.
That's another thing we can talk about. Autism. Apparently, we know what the source is now.
Okay, yeah, we can go there. I mean, yeah, the whole situation to me seemed like a very passive aggressive, shitty European thing to do. Like, it's something that shitty Europeans would do. Like, they're not gonna like say anything to his face. They're not gonna. It's almost like Canadians too, right? Like, they're not gonna disrespect you to your face. They're not gonna do anything like outright aggressive toward you. What they're gonna do is they're just gonna fuck with the escalator and your teleprompter and like ruin your day and try to make you look like an idiot, right?
Well, I mean, the entirety of the UN is just one. It almost feels like the world is run by these European elites. It's kind of like this little group. You see Macron, in France, and Keir Starmer from the UK there.
Starmer, yeah.
Starmer, whatever. Fuck, dude, it's or you have German chancellor. I don't even know who it is anymore. Ever since Angela Merkel is gone, I don't even know who's running freaking. What's his name again? I'd recognize his name if it was like written. But anyways, it's like this little group, and they're everywhere they go. They come to the US, they try to meddle there. They go to Ukraine, they try to meddle there. They're just trying to, I don't know. It feels like Europe is trying to keep up or keep on for dear life. I mean, they're kind of irrelevant now when you consider the fact that The US, I mean, Jesus fuck, just one US company, Nvidia, is worth more, I believe. And don't quote me on this, but I've seen some numbers, and it's something ludicrous like the one company or like five US companies are worth more than the entire European stock market combined together. So that gives you an idea. Like Europe is now pretty much economically irrelevant in the world.
I don't know that stat, but I would imagine that to be true, just considering how the EU has basically, turned into the socialist slaughterhouse, right? I mean,
Fuck, for sure.
so actually, Elliot, while we're on this topic, you did this really amazing video, reel, about Europe's declining population.
Hmm.
I know you don't have the numbers right in front of you, but can you go into that a little bit? What is happening in Europe with their population?
Well, I mean, the same thing that's happening everywhere in the world, in the Western world, I should say, not the world in general. But there's been a steady decline of the birth rate. So, to lay the foundation, right, a civilization requires 2.2 kids per woman in order to sustain itself. It's called the replacement rate. If the number drops below over time, there will be a decline of population. There has never been a civilization that has overcome a 1.6 or 1.8 birth rate or ratio of birth rate. And right now, just about every European country, Canada included in this, and even the US, are teetering on the edge of collapse. We have places like Greece at 1.3, Germany 1.3, Spain like 1.1. It's not sustainable. So for people to understand why it's not sustainable, it's because first of all, there's a population, you have to look at a population pyramid, it's called. If you map out the size of a population based by age, you should always have a pyramid shaped foundation, basically a lot of young people and a narrowing or smaller population as you head towards, older age, which is good because older people tend to be a burden on the system, not due to any fault of their own. It's just more healthcare, more social benefits, pension, you name it. So you want to have a small or bigger population to support such a thing. Right now in the Western world, that pyramid is flipping, it's inversing. So we have an aging population that makes up a large percentage of the general public and a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of people coming into the workforce being able to support that. This puts a impossibly hard strain or impossibly heavy strain on the financial system, and it makes it impossible to fund all the social programs that Europeans and Canadians love. It is mathematically impossible. The first country that will probably collapse from this is not even in Europe or Canada, it's Korea. Korea has the lowest birth rate in all of the world, closely followed by Japan. And these two countries are probably on a collision course right now in a way that is impossible to reverse. There will be either complete economic collapse due to the inability for the economy to sustain such a shift in population, or there will have to be mass migration to counteract that economically, which will inadvertently just or kick the can down the road and actually cause another type of collapse, which is a cultural collapse, a countrywide collapse. You cannot sustain such high levels of immigration without your country losing its essence. So we can consider that Korea is done, Japan is done. In Europe, probably one of the first countries to see the massive downside of that will be Belgium. Belgium right now is slated to become, and I kid you not, an Islamic Republic by 2050. The reason why I say this is because Belgium has been able to sustain itself, even though its population, its birth rate is too low, by bringing immigrants. And they started doing that very early. Japan and Korea refused to do it, and only now they're opening the floodgates, which is not going to save them. Again, like I said, it's just going to lead to a destruction of their country, but later down the line. Belgium decided to open a floodgate earlier. The issue is that the immigrant population, which in their case is mostly Islamic, they come in with a birth rate of 3, 4, 5, 6 kids per woman. And over a few short generations, their descendants overcome the native population. And as such, if they have not integrated properly, which we know there's a lot of integration issues in Europe and Canada as well. Well, it can lead to a democratic shift in the government. I mean, without a revolution, without any armed conflict, just through utilizing the democratic institutions and people being able to vote, they can vote in a complete different form of government. And in their case, they tend to be very fundamentally religious. Well, that will probably lead to Sharia law and an Islamic type government, caliphate, republic, you name it, but it will not be Belgium as Belgians know it, as Europeans know it. This will happen to France. This will happen to the UK. This is mathematics. This is not some hypotheses. This is not some opinion. This is purely math derived and math based. So, in short, if a native population is not having kids and that lack of reproduction is allowed to occur to continue for a significant period of time as it has right now, it will lead to the collapse of a country. And that's why when we see Elon Musk go online, and he said it before, and he said that there is the biggest threat to the Western world is that women and families are not having enough kids. And then he jokes and says, I'm doing my part. I have like fucking, 8 different kids. Well, he's partly kidding about the kids that, yeah, he's doing his part, but it's not a joke. It is probably the single biggest threat to our world because it affects the culture, it affects the economy, and it affects ultimately the viability of an entire country. So this is why I made that video, because I think it was the most important video I've ever made.
I think so too. And, so I'm working on a essay. I've been taking a lot of time with it on immigration, tentatively titled right now, called The Great Replacements, and kind of exploring the idea, not exploring the idea, but exploring why we are being replaced. And, I had Matthew Horwood on the podcast. He's a journalist with Epoch Times. I had him on the podcast a few months ago when we were talking about this issue, and he brought up a good point, and it's exactly the one that you outlined here, that Westerners are not having children. And so I've been kind of exploring why, and I think the reason why people are not having children is because they can't afford them, and that our problem really stems from a cost of living crisis, inflation, money printing, inflated home prices, literally everything. And so therefore people, 10 years younger than me, I'm 42. So people I would imagine in your age group are not having children strictly because they can't afford to. I mean, even just childcare costs are through the roof, right? Justin Trudeau, something that people in Canada and outside our American friends will want to hear as well is, Justin Trudeau and the Liberal Party introduced something in Canada called $10 a day childcare, which equates to roughly, $300 a month for childcare, right? And so prior to that, there was a childcare subsidy because daycares and preschools are extremely expensive in Canada. They can range anywhere from $2,000 a month and up. So they introduced a childcare subsidy to try to help people who couldn't afford childcare to get that. And then they switched it over to the $10 a day childcare. Well, what happened was, and this is, I know this person well, a single mother in my community. She has 3 children. And she was receiving a childcare subsidy that made it so that she could put her children in preschool or daycare during the day while she worked, and she was only paying something like $500 or $600 a month. Well, with the $10 a day childcare, her cost went up to roughly around $900 to $1,000, and that's and for a single mother who's making $20 an hour, without a formal education, that's death. That's
absolutely
end, right. And so I think that's the sort of scenario that young people don't want to find themselves in and are trying to avoid by not having children. Not to mention the fact that they've been told that our entire world is on fire, and that by bringing children into this world, you're literally bringing them into the apocalypse.
Which is insane, because it's literally the lack of children that brings about the apocalypse. Furthermore, I mean, having kids, and look, I'm a father, right? I have a 2-year-old or almost 2.5-year-old. And it's done the opposite. It's giving me hope for the world. It's fucked up, but it's, before I was dooming and glooming a heck of a lot more because I had nothing to strive for. It was just all personal, individualistic. Now I have a son. And I'm like, you know what? There's a chance that his generation will have it better than me. And it's okay. It's not a jealousy thing. It's not like, oh, I wish I had a better life. No, it's I'm going to do everything in my power so that he has a better life, and I'm going to pass down the torch for him to carry and to have a better life. I think that's what parenthood does. It makes you strive for more. So oddly enough, the fear of the world being fucked up actually drives people to not have kids, like you said. And there's a few points I wrote down also why I think there's a lack of kids. I think it's a multifaceted issue. But the that doom and gloom, oddly enough, is perpetuated by not having kids because, you talk to parents, anyone that I know that has kids, and they're all like, you know what? Sure, things are fucked up, but I'm going to do my part to hopefully have a better world for my kids. It's motivation that is unlike anything else. And I mean, you tell me, is that something that you feel as well on your end? Because I know you're a father as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, prior to having children, what when you have children, it brings you a type of purpose that you didn't know before. Mm-hmm. Right? Like for myself, I have contemplated shutting down this podcast so many times. I've contemplated just stopping doing everything and just going and working in a cubicle at some corporation until I'm 65 and disappearing into the background. Because the truth is, I'm a writer. Like I've never imagined myself being in front of the camera. I never imagined myself doing this. I don't like being in front of the camera a lot of time. I'm a background guy. I always have been. But I have to, the thing is what having children has done for me is it's like, number one, I have to have on people like Elliot Daigneault who have a clear perspective of the problems that we're facing so that we can fix them so that my children don't have to live through what we're living through. That's number one. Mm-hmm. But number two, just as a secondary, I want to build something for them. And I recognize that Brave New Normal, this podcast, has grown over the last few years that I've done it. My writing has expanded. Everything is growing. So maybe this might be the only real talent God gave me. And I have to use it, not for myself. I'm doing it so that I can build something for my children, or at least encourage them to build something. So that's what having children does, is you stop looking at the world through a selfish lens. You're looking at everything through their lens. You're trying to set them up for maybe not like, wild monetary success, but teach them how to dream, how to have vision, how to innovate, how to create things. Right. And
absolutely,
if I quit, if I give up, then what am I doing? Like, you know what I mean? If I give up and I go into a cubicle, what example am I setting for them? So yeah, I mean, just on that level, yeah, having children changes everything. And honestly, I'll say this, the people that are most unhappy that I know in my age group are the people that don't have children.
That's a wild realization, but I completely concur with you. And I think we're only now starting to see the outcome of the decisions that society has taken. What I mean by that is, I've outlined here, you mentioned economics. What's one of the reasons why people are not having kids? I wrote feminism. That's a big one. And I'll touch on that because it can be touchy a little bit. Families and communities, the views on families and communities has shifted. There's been a societal ideals shift as well, what to glorify, what not to glorify. There's been a lack of or a change in religion as well. And there is the economy. But let's start with the feminism part because it leads to that. One of my fundamental value is equality. Well, not equality, freedom. Let's start with freedom, right? But freedom also leads to equality because if you're free to make your decisions, everyone's equal to make their own decisions. The outcome won't be the same, but the freedom part is. So I strongly am glad that people have equal rights in our society. That's not the issue. For me, the feminism that we're seeing today is the third wave feminism, which is kind of pushing girls to say, screw being a mother, fuck having a family, be a big boss corporate babe, and that will bring about much more fulfillment than a man ever could. And you know what? maybe in their early 20s, that's true. Maybe even in their early 30s, that's true. But I can't tell you how many girls now that I know that are reaching the mid 30s or the early 40s. And the consequences of their decisions early on in life is finally catching up to them. They're at a point where they really want to nurture and bring a life in this world, but there's two issues. One, on the health or fertility side of things, it ain't what it used to be in their mid 20s and early 30s. So there's issues there. Even girls that are in loving relationships are having a hard time conceive. Number two, the ones who are not in relationships are having a very hard time finding a good guy. Their biggest complaint, there's no good man out there. Well, I mean, there was a time when your, marketplace value was a little bit higher, and now it's on the decline. It's just the reality of genetics and the reality of how men and women interact. And now you complain that guys are only interested in girls that are a little bit younger than you. And you'll find all the excuses. And I've heard this recently from a girl in Germany. She was visiting Montreal and she was complaining about how, yeah, I was dating this guy. He was like around my age, like 41, 42. But then he left me for a girl who was 28. And, she's dumb. She doesn't have the ability to have conversations like I do. And I said, look, I'm sure that's true. I'm sure you have a lot of, intellectual value. But ultimately, if this man wants a family and wants kids, he's probably better off with the 28-year-old than a woman who's 41, 42. Not that there's anything wrong with you, but it's a genetic thing. So feminism has led to, one, women foregoing having kids in their peak fertility window and making it considerably harder, if ever they actually do want to have kids later on, to have kids. So that's one of the reasons why the fertility is down. Second of all, it also drives a lot of girls away from wanting to have kids, and they think being a corporate slave all their life is cool. I mean, I don't know if it's the same with you, but I feel like I do speak for the vast majority of men when I say this. In my earlier days when I was dating around a little bit, I would like meet a girl. Let's say she was like a big corporate girl, and she'd be like, I don't understand why it's so hard to find a guy. I have a good job, I make good money. And one day I had to let the girl know, I'm like, to be honest with you, nobody gives a fuck that you have a good job and you make good money, because a man will date a barista at Starbucks. It's not about how much money you bring. You're trying to project what you're looking for in a man, onto you. It's like guys who go to the fucking gym, they get real buff and they think all girls are going to compliment them. And instead it's all the gym bros that compliment them. Looks don't matter that much to a girl when it comes to a guy. It's just not the primary thing. Sure, it helps, but it's not the primary thing. Well, vice versa. Your job, your status, your accomplishments don't really matter to men when it comes to a woman. It's cool, it's nice, 2 thumbs up, encourage you to pursue your dreams, but is that going to make it or break it for my attraction level towards you or wanting to have a family with you? Zero. Fuck all. Niet nada. I think that is majority what men would agree on.
And Elliot, just to jump in there, in some cases, I think it actually detracts from the attraction, because as men, what we're looking for are future mothers. Right.
Yep.
So when you're dating a woman who is wrapped up in a career, a corporate, whatever, it actually kind of detracts from your attraction to her, because genetically you're looking for a woman who is going to be nurturing and comforting and be capable of raising children. Right. And somebody who is wrapped up in themselves and wrapped up in their career is not going to be able to provide that. And I think that's why a lot of career women still find themselves single and don't understand it. They're like, I have the house, I have the car, I have all the things. Why aren't men attracted to this? Well, they're just intimidated. No, what they're looking for genetically on an instinctive level is a woman who is going to fit the role of mother.
Absolutely. And you're spot on. And that brings to, the economic side is an interesting thing. You've mentioned families have a hard time financially, and it's true. Having kids is expensive. And side note, the $10 a day daycare thing is a Quebec program. We've had this for generations. It's funny. It's something that's been around for decades, actually. So Canada decided to copy Quebec. We love our social programs in Quebec, and we're different than everyone else. Oddly enough, though, and I do have to say this, in my research, Quebec in all of Canada is the place with the highest fertility rate. It's not at replacement level, but it is the highest in all the provinces. So maybe it helps a little bit. But
French women love to fuck. We all know that.
They do, but it doesn't mean they like to have a family, though. we're all descendants of whores, by the way, in Quebec. This is not a this we are historically. If you look at history, and I don't know if I mentioned this to you before, but back when Quebec was New France, the king wanted colonies to expand, and there was only men or very few women here. So he rounded up all the prostitutes in the kingdom, not kidding, put them on ships, and set the ships off to the New World to be wedded to the colonists. This also explains why Quebec City has the hottest girls and Montreal, they're okay, because Quebec City is upstream from the river, not kidding. So it was the first stop. So all the hottest, the bestest, top AU5 Wagyu girls would be wedded in Quebec, and then it would go down the stream. They stop in Trois-Rivières, and then the second grade, the choice selection would go there, and then we get to Montreal and we get the the dog meat stuff. So, but speaking of economics, there's also the fact that on an evolutionary standpoint as well, women tend to date across or above, right? In terms of social status, in terms of resources, whereas men tend to date across or below. Well, in a hyper feministic society where women, and good for them, they've managed to climb the ladder and get to the positions, I'm sure, to be honest with you, mostly due to their competency, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the byproduct is that these women, all of a sudden now, are not attracted or drawn towards the average guy, because the average guy just doesn't provide anything for them that they can't provide for themselves. 100 years ago, and I'm not saying it was necessarily the best structure then, but 100 years ago, when a woman truly economically was nothing unless she was under the protection of her father or her husband, well, it made it so that any man who had a job, and that's what, the good old Hollywood's movies from back in the day, it's like, do you have a job? Yes, good. You're like a candidate. That's all that mattered. You have a job, so you're capable of at least somewhat providing, and the dollar obviously went further. That was enough for a girl. But now today, if you're not making six figures plus, if you're not this big time executive, whatever, if you're not excelling at your field, well, you're almost weeded out of the dating pool. And the issue is that it creates a return to a modern day type harem. Obviously, back in the day, the monarchy, the aristocracy had access to all the women, and then people would fight for the fucking scrap, the concubines for the emperor, you name it. Well, nowadays it's the same. The guys that are on top, the top 5, 10, 15% of men, have access to an untold levels of women. Dating apps, social media has only exacerbated that issue. And regular guys, good guys, like legitimately good-hearted, family-driven men who have a decent job and they earn a decent living and they're doing everything right, well, they become invisible because they're just regular and they cannot provide to a woman what she cannot provide to herself anymore. And genetically, instinctually, it destroys that little attraction mechanism inside their heads. I'm not blaming girls with this. I'm blaming society in general for creating a structure now that does that. But that's a side note on economics. And it also kind of creates a fucked up delusion where a lot of girls will hook up with the top guys thinking that they're top shit because of that. But they fail to realize the top guy will fuck you, for lack of better words, but that doesn't mean he'll date you.
Yeah.
But then they create this image in their head. They're fucking, they're like A-lister celebrities. They should have, they should have the Ronaldo, or they should have the fucking Brad Pitt, because these guys will DM them, use and abuse them for a night or two and then toss them out. That ain't the case, girl. You're at a lower level. You should realize. So that's another factor. And obviously this is something we can talk a lot. I don't want to drag on too much, but there's been a shift in families and communities as well. Families now are smaller and more broken and more, spread out. They're not as close, and communities as well. There's not the sense of community. Is that also due to the mass migration that's happening and creating a looser fabric of society? Probably. Things kind of play into each other. Well, without families around and a community around, having kids is hard. Raising a kid is fucking hard. And back in the day, most people lived in multi-generational family, or at least you were really close to your community, and people helped each other taking care of kids, your parents, your grandparents, whatever. The grandparents were there, the parents were there. Now it's, kids move away, they live in a shoebox condo, and they have 2 jobs each, or they have a job each, and they're expected to raise a kid. It's a huge amount of strain. It's not designed to be this way. Having the parents around, or in their case, the grandparents of the kid around to help, is huge. But families are broken. Families are not tightly knit, or there's no community. So that doesn't help. societal ideals have shifted. Again, we're pushing more and more individualistic approaches and saying that families is just a pain. It's taken away from accomplishing your dreams. And I think it couldn't be further from the truth, but it's put in the minds of countless younger folks, guys and girls, that having a family is a drag more than it is an amazing opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of which, economically, if you look at the economic success outcome from single individuals, married individuals with kids, or single individuals with kids, the people who succeed the most and make the most money are married individuals with kids. In every freaking studies, it's always them. So oddly enough, having kids and having a family probably will help you in terms of economics. It forces you, again, to strive for more, to make the sacrifices, to have hope for tomorrow, less doom and gloom, less nihilism, and more optimism. And optimism is super important. And the last thing I'll touch on is religion. I'm not personally religious practicing guy. Sure, I was brought up Christian, baptized, first communion, you name it. But is that something I practice every day? No. But I do think there's a role for religion. And the further we are getting away from it, I feel like the more the fabric again of society is shifting. Religion was all about promoting family values, about, women having womanly roles, men having manly roles, protectors, providers, and how do we bring kids in this world? And sadly, as people moved away from religion, again, it further eroded the family unit and the promotion of family values. So I think all these things play into the hands of why our birth rate is so low. Sorry, man, that was a lot.
No, don't be, man. That was fascinating. I'll just touch on the religion part. Like I'm Christian, but I'm not like a traditional practicing Christian. But I will just say this, that my spiritual foundation, even just like at baseline, right? When things are going wrong, when things are not working out for me, I still have the faith that there is a higher being, an omnipotent force that is at work around me. So even just that faith alone gives me the ability to carry on and push forward. And whether it's through some cosmic God magic or pure coincidence, things tend to work themselves out. And I think that when you don't have that spiritual foundation underneath you, your perspective on the world is that you are alone. And when that's your perspective, when that's your view, you're more likely to admit defeat, and you're more likely to give up, right? You're kind of like you're in a maze and you're lost, and there's no guide, there's no roadmap there, right? And so just from that perspective alone, like my spiritual foundation gives me tons of guidance. Even if God is not involved in like 99% of what I'm doing, my faith that God is behind me, or that I'm on God's side, pushes me through some very difficult challenges and situations. And when I find myself on the other side, usually I end up with a good result, right? So just that alone, right? Like I'm not like this evangelist guy. I'm not going to sit here and talk to you about, the magic of Jesus for 3 hours on end. But what I will say is that having a spiritual foundation, having a belief in God, relieves a lot of the stress and anxiety that comes along with being just a human person, right? Now,
that is such a good point.
And so I think that is one of the root causes why this is all falling apart around us. Like all of my atheist friends, or the people who consider themselves agnostic, they're all dealing with just like existential crisis after existential crisis. You know what I mean? Like, whereas no matter whether or not you think that whatever I'm talking to out there is real or not, just through my faith, just talking to God and praying and asking for guidance and believing that I'm receiving guidance helps me navigate the world. Whereas without that, I'm just spinning in circles, right? So I think that's it too, right?
That is a very good point. And I've heard this a lot from people that are religious, or at least have some level of faith, and it doesn't matter in which God or gods they believe in, but it's believing that there's something bigger than them, and that they can get through it as long as they have this belief in this thing that is greater than them. If you take a second to just think you're alone in this world, like you said, and what's the point of any of this? Well, you succumb to this negative pattern, and then it's a negative feedback loop, and then you just, you end up eating Cheetos in bed, drinking yourself to sleep. If you aspire to more, and that's another thing too in society, again, when society was more religious, we aspired to more. Everything from the architecture to, universities, the studies, the individual families, people had this godly aspiration, realize we would never be capable of reaching the level of God, but we can aspire to live up to his tenets, to his principles, and to his holiness. But now we worship fuck all. We worship the individual. We worship, hedonism. Basically, is just how much fucking fun can I have? And this drives to a degenerate society. And may I add, and you mentioned something really good, and it just came back to my head. You said a lot of people are worried that times are tough, and what's the point of bringing a kid in this world? And that ties into this, but on a different perspective, are times tough? I mean, sure, okay, cool, but I mean, have we lived through the Black fucking Plague? Have we lived through the First or Second World War? Through the Mongols horde conquering half of the world? Have we lived through the fall of a government? I mean, let's be fucking honest. Ultimately, we're living in some of the coziest time the world has ever seen. Sure, it's not quite, the economic prosperity and the stability, societally speaking, that our grandparents had or even our parents had. But I mean, for fuck's sakes, in the time continuing of humanity, we're not living in that tough of times. And to think that you're here today because thousands of your ancestors have struggled through death, disease, destruction, tyranny, war, so that you're here today and you're going to give up, you're going to be the weakest link. I'm a hyper competitive guy. I come from a background of hockey. And when I started thinking that way, I became like, holy fuck, I need to have like 20,000 kids. I'm not letting the lineage die with me. Right. I'm not going to be the weakest link in this entire thing.
Right. Oh, dude. Well, like, I'll just say this, like, so with the podcast and with my writing and with everything that I'm doing, I've thrown myself into it completely. Right. And dude, I have times where, like, money gets a little tight and I start panicking and I'm like, shit, like I got 2 kids. Like, what the fuck am I doing? I ruined my whole fucking life. A lady at the grocery store just called me a Nazi because her husband likes my podcast. You know what I mean? I'm unemployable. Everybody knows who I am around where I am. I can't get a job even if I need to. What the fuck did I do? I ruined everything. I destroyed my life. And then I have that a bit, like, just having that spiritual connection. I go, you know what? Just let it go. God's got me, and whatever will be, will be. I know that God's guiding me, and I'm just going to roll with it. I know I'm here for a reason, so let's just roll. And just having that ability, man. Look, for the non-believers watching this, for the atheists, the agnostics, or even the Christians who don't really believe in God, because there's a lot of those people too. If what I just said sounds like voodoo magic to you, fine. But at the end of the day, I have that underneath me. That faith is what leads me and allows me to think with a clear mind and see the path ahead of me, rather than just being in panic mode and being like, I'm all alone. I have to figure this out. I have no idea where to go next. If I can take that burden and just say, you know what, I'm going to push that to the side. God's got me. God's going to guide me. I know it. Dude, you have no idea how many times, even in the last 3 months, that I've had to do that. And it just allows me to see the path and think clearly about what's next, right? It relieves me of the anxiety and the stress that fogs my mind up and makes me make bad decisions, right? Now, going back to the third wave feminism thing, because I did want to comment on that. So my wife is a very beautiful woman, fucking 10 leagues above me. I still look at her in the morning. I'm like, how did I even do this? I have no idea. But my wife loves being a mom. And I remember when there was that big surge in third wave feminism, and all of my wife's friends were getting into it. And, they would send her text messages or in conversation and be like, don't you understand that your husband's oppressing you, that you could be so much more, that you're being oppressed by the patriarchy and all. And, my wife was always, she would get frustrated, right? Because she'd be like, I like being a wife. I like being a mom. For my wife, you know, her role as mother is what gives her purpose in life. It's what gets her out of bed every morning. Like, and she would always say, like, they don't understand what it's like to actually be a mom. And it's funny because a lot of those women now later in life are becoming mothers themselves in their late 30s and early 40s. And I don't, and they're finding purpose way late in life. And it's interesting to watch that transformation take place because, yeah, like, I just think that I think that culturally, you know, this word toxic gets thrown around a lot, but I think our culture has become toxic. I think our culture is the disease, and that
Yeah.
we've allowed in these ideas that are clearly detrimental to the future of our own communities and society. And now we're dealing with that. And like, for example, with this immigration situation, our government's answer is to just bring in more people rather than figure out how to bring down inflation and adjust the cost of living. And, you know, I was listening to Right Call the other day, and, you know, you guys were talking about a massive correction in the housing market.
Hmm.
That seems to be inadvertent because it looks to me, at least, like China's pulling a lot of their money out of Canada, and that's what's causing it. But the people that we have elected to solve all of our problems would rather just import new people into the country rather than figure out how to make life better for the people living here.
But see, and this is where, you know, I've been confronted to this. I've been wrestling, I should say, with this idea for a while, because I don't want to dive into conspiracy. I don't. But at the same time, I mean, any rational person eventually just has to come to a realization. So what I've been wrestling with is it incompetency or is it by design? And, you know, initially when Trudeau got into office in 2015 and he started implementing certain things, I just thought he was incompetent, or maybe he was just different ideologically speaking. But as it went on, you know, people say he's an idiot, and that's why like everyone turned on him. I'm like, I don't think he was that much of a fucking idiot. You know, I think he was very, very good, but he wasn't good at what you thought he was doing. That's the difference, right? So same thing with Carney right now. I think Carney is even more competent than Trudeau, which is what scares me about Mark Carney. But the thing is, he's not going to be competent at what you expect. You expect the Canadian government to support and promote your interests, to better your life, to do what's right by you as a normal day Canadian. Sadly, if that's what you're expecting, you're going to realize he's very incompetent. But I mean, again, you don't get into positions that he's been in by being incompetent. You get in there by being very competent and also knowing how to play politics and rub the right shoulders and make friends. But nonetheless, so what he's doing is again, if you shift your perspective from what he's doing is to help Canada to a different perspective, one that could be it's to destroy Canada or change Canada's position in the world or serve the interests of a different group, nation, organization, or even just personal benefits, then you start realizing that no, what he's doing, the decisions he's making makes complete sense. I mean, I invite people to do this for real. Take your AI of choice, ChatGPT, DeepSeek, Grok, Claude, you name it, and write in there a declination of the following. If you were the leader of a country and you wanted to, you know, demoralize it and create a system of control over people, how would you do it? You know, and watch the answers it gives you. Then contrast and compare with what's been happening in most Western countries over the last 10 years, except the US under Donald Trump, by the way. You'll start realizing very quickly, it doesn't matter if it's left or right, conservative or liberal government, a lot of the policies that have been put in place have been to hijack power, usurp power from the people, create a system of dependency and control over people, and ultimately also ship a lot of the money away from the country to help foreign nations, which inadvertently does two things. I think it helps and funds slush funds and shady organization abroad to further their purpose, and also lots of kickbacks to politicians. You know, again, we spoke about Trudeau, how do you get so rich, you know, back in the days? It's apply to politician of your choice. How do politicians on politician salaries go from earning a reasonable and decent low six-figure income to being multi-zillionaires by the time they're out of office? It's not through clever investments. It's definitely not through you know, their jobs. Oftentimes it's those slush funds. It's the biggest racket ever. Take money, ship it to, say, Ukraine. The second it leaves the country, it's not accounted for anymore. And it's not the responsibility of your home country to account for it anymore. Plus, anyways, it's impossible to account for it anymore. And I lost my light, by the way. Oh
It's all
shit.
good,
Anyway,
brother. Keep going. Keep
uh,
going. You look good.
yeah,
Keep,
yeah,
keep running.
now, that money obviously comes back and oftentimes does and under the form of kickbacks. It can be to a donation to a foundation. It could be to a shell company offshore. I mean, we saw the Panama Papers. All these politicians have offshore accounts. So that's a great way to fund these countries. It doesn't help Canada. It doesn't help the U.S. They always say this. It's to promote the ideals that Canada has, is to help these countries, which helps improve our national security. To an extent, some of these things do, but the vast majority don't. And meanwhile, other countries stand to benefit. I mean, we can talk about, oh my God, they're just like the holy cow that you're not supposed to talk about. But why does the US send billions and billions and billions of dollars to the state of Israel every fucking year? I'm not pro against Israel. I'm just saying it is the single greatest line item for foreign aid. And we're talking about an incredibly developed economy, like an economy that is even more developed than the US. And the US taxpayers funding them. Why? Why are they funding them? Well, when you start realizing that there's a lot of dual citizen in Congress and in governments and lots of people that identify with the faith, you start wondering, okay, where's the true allegiance of these people? So same thing applies to Canada. I think a lot of the moves we make in Canada benefit other entities, other countries. I've spoken about China before. I think, although there's this little public feud, Canada, China, I think behind the scenes we're playing into the hands of China. And I think, there's been a couple of Freudian slips from Trudeau and even Carney, who recently even said that he admires Chinese government. And it's just like, okay, why do liberals admire China so fucking much? Why is it always China that they admire? So, and then you put a ban on gasoline cars, which forces you to go EV, which again, logistically makes no fucking sense. And then you realize, okay, well, who is the biggest producer of, battery technology and then rare earth minerals? And then you realize it's all China, and China pushes fucking green energy left and right, even though it doesn't necessarily apply to, the benefit of most countries. Why is that? It's economics. Anyways, you enter into some fucking a spiral and you realize, look, listen, ultimately, and that was again long-winded just to say, the politicians in place are not necessarily there to help you. And it's not that they're incompetent. They're just really good at doing what they're doing. The problem is that their incentives are not the same as yours. That's the issue.
I love that we fell down this rabbit hole, because that's exactly where I've been. Because so I do an episode with Sam Cooper every couple of weeks, right? And Sam has been all over this China story for the last, 10, 15 years. And the thing that I always ask him is this incompetence or is this deliberate? Is this by design? Right? And Sam, being the, high integrity investigative journalist that he is, he only talks about what he can prove. Mm-hmm. But when you put all the pieces together and you've been talking to this guy for 28 plus hours, what you realize is that this has to be by design. It has to be. There's no other way. It's impossible for anybody to be this stupid, right? And if it's by design, then why? What's the purpose? And I've thought about this a lot, and I truly believe that we are being led headfirst into a system of neo-feudalism. If you even look at, so take the World Economic Forum, for example, their big mantra for, the last however many years until people figured out what they were up to and they suddenly had to go a little bit more quiet. All they talked about were public-private partnerships, right? Public-private partnership. That was the catchphrase. Well, it's just a fancy way of saying fascism. And look, if you're talking about the public and the private sector merging to create this corporate blob, you as the average fucking taxpayer peon, do you really think there's any slice of that pie waiting for you at the end of that road? No. You are going to be a peasant. Your job, look at COVID. Elliot, you're a numbers guy, and I'm sure you've looked into the numbers on this. Look at the trillions of dollars in wealth transfer from the middle class to the corporations and the wealthy classes during COVID. It was the largest wealth transfer in history.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason for that. There's a reason why the average home price is the average cost of a home, well, at least was $1.4 million. There's a reason why you go to the grocery store and to buy groceries for the week, your bill is $600. It's because you're being subjugated. You're being pushed further and further into peasantry. You just don't realize it because you can go on Amazon, you can order, your whatever, and it comes tomorrow, and you can still go to the mall and buy your Nike shoes, and maybe you drive a 2025 Hyundai Elantra that's going to fucking break down on the side of the highway in a year anyways, right? Like, you still have things, so you're placated, but the reality is you're being slowly pushed further and further and further into poverty, right?
Anyone who understands manipulation, and this is a subsect of just the rules of power in general, but anyone who understands manipulation understands that the best way to manipulate someone is when they don't even think you're manipulating them, because every choice they make is their own, but yet it serves you, right? Again, it's give someone two options, both of them serve your purpose, let them make the choice, they fall into your game regardless. So absolutely, I think there's always been, look, humans on a psychological level are hierarchical, and there's always been these very power hungry people that have always wanted to hoard all the power and the resources to themselves. And again, that's just in our nature. If you learn through history and you realize that when it's done overtly or too obvious or too intensely, people rebel and push against it. Well, you can do it in a way that is very sneaky and deceptive, and where people believe they retain freedom, and yet they don't have any. The private-public partnership thing is a huge one, and it's interesting. I've never heard anyone say it. Like, and you're the first one, or maybe it was Sam Cooper, right?
Yeah.
That said it. Yeah.
No, that's me. That's me. I read just as a bit of background for people listening. I read Klaus Schwab's dumb fucking book, The Great Reset, and that's where he laid the whole thing out. And honestly, it's like a 200-page corporate brochure for fascism, essentially.
Another thing too about these guys, by the way, is that they'll put it in your face. They'll put it in your face, and I've read reasons why they do this. Like, now this is just complete hearsay, but it's almost like a cosmic thing for them. They're like, well, if we tell the sheeps flat out what we're about to do and they don't react to it and they just accept it, well, it's their fault. They've ultimately, in a weird twisted way, accepted that that's what they wanted. It's apparently a way for them, like, again, on a holistic reason to absolve themselves of whatever. Anyways, that's just hearsay, but China does that already.
I also want to say this too. They do this because they know that the general public are too fucking dumb to really understand it, right? So they tell you what they're going to do so that they get so that basically they draw out your complicity in the plan. That they
probably
essentially what they're doing is, you use the analogy of sheep, but what they're doing is they're walking you to the slaughterhouse, telling you that you're about to be slaughtered, but that you're going to get a lollipop on the way in. And
exactly,
all see is the lollipop. You know what I mean?
So imagine yourself being the sheep and you're being told, hey, we're going to the slaughterhouse, we're going to kill you, but we'll give you a lollipop, and you're willingly walking there. Then you, as the slaughterer, can be like, well, they walked themselves there, they wanted to get slaughtered, I didn't do anything wrong, because I do think, and again, I think there is a spirituality in life, no matter how you see it. And I think that's the way they justify it to themselves. They said, like, I didn't do anything wrong, the people accepted it, they didn't fight back. China, and by the way, just another little analogy so that people understand what we mean by that. I'm sure it's all happened to us. We're hanging out with someone who doesn't have all the information about something, and let's say it's like you, me, and a third person, right? Call him fucking Eric, and you and I know something that Eric doesn't know, and we'll drop little hints and laugh, and it's like this inside joke between us, and Eric kind of like dumbfounded, doesn't understand, and maybe we're even making fun of Eric about it, and he doesn't catch the fact that we're making fun of him. That's pretty much what they're doing to us every day.
Yes.
But China already does this public-private partnership thing. I mean, every single entity in China is going to say that, yeah, we're a capitalist-free economy, but the state kind of owns or retains shares or rights or decisional power in pretty much every entity over there. And if you think that it cannot be used against you, I love to use the example of Jack Ma, one of the richest Chinese. He's a billionaire, and Jack Ma was disappeared for 3 months. One of the wealthiest, most powerful person of China, but not in government, was disappeared by the Chinese government for 3 months because he held certain beliefs that he spoke publicly that was not aligned with the Chinese Communist Party, to the point where his board of directors, his executive team, had no idea where he went. He just fell off the face of the earth for 3 months. They assumed, I'm sure they were used to that shit in China. And he came back randomly 3 months later, went on the air, gave a public apology for the statements he had made, saying that they were not aligned with what he truly believed, and that he's happy to be back. That's it. We never heard of it again. So that's, in a way, what we're going to be heading towards. And we're seeing the pieces slowly but surely being put in place, even Canada. And I've been a bit like you, disconnected from Canada, because honestly, I'm so fucking fed up with this shit.
Me too.
But now this new government's in place, and they're putting in, they're bringing on bills, hate speech bills, and economic bills. And when you really dig deep into it, I realize it's just more and more control over people. Like, that hate speech bill is fucking scary. Scary.
Can you go into it a little bit, Elliot?
Oh yeah, they want to outlaw symbols, for example. Symbols. I mean, I'm sorry to say, I'm not ever going to condone, doing the Nazi salute or drawing a swastika. But to be quite honest with you, I think you should have the right to do it. It doesn't mean people will not make fun of you, will not, confront you for it. It's their right to confront you for it. But I don't think it's the place of the state to ever, and I mean ever, tell you what is right or wrong to say, to draw, to write. And that's where we're heading. And it's always under the auspice of safety. It's always on the auspice, or, from the auspice of, we're trying to protect people. Well, you're not protecting anyone. You're actually just drawing away. It was like the same thing in COVID. We're doing these things to protect you. We're locking you down to protect you. It's always going to be for a wholesome reason. And people buy it. They're just like, yeah, well, you know what? Like, yeah, you're right. If it prevents someone from feeling hurt, fuck off. Words are not, it's if you're hurt by words, the problem is you. It's not the words. I'm sorry. It's like, and we're at a point. I'm seriously concerned, because if it's anything like the UK, and our current prime minister also loves to emulate a little bit the UK, he spent a lot of time there. They're at a point right now in the United Kingdom where police will show up at your house and arrest you for not even for posting something, but rather for liking something on social media. Mm-hmm. Just interacting, so much as interacting with the content, a meme, a fucking meme, that it could be considered hateful. I mean, Jesus fuck, I'm the first one going to the gulag, because if you saw my Instagram reels and the shit that pops up on there, I'm going to read education camp the first day that law comes into effect. So,
well, listen, I want to jump in here because I do want to say something about this. I want to clarify something for the audience. Like, by outlawing symbols, when you talk about it, Elliot alluded to it at the beginning of his statement. You're thinking about swastikas. You're thinking about Nazi salutes. You're thinking of the worst of the worst. But that's not what they're targeting. Mm-mm. Look, at the end of the day, if you walk around with a Star of David on your neck, or a Palestine flag on your shoulder, or a rainbow flag over your head, those are all protected groups. You know what's not a protected group? Christians. And me walking around with a crucifix around my neck will be considered offensive to the protected groups. And this is why you can't have protected groups in a free society, because safety leads to this, right? And sorry, Elliot, I had to share that thought, because that's
a great
where
thought.
My mind went when we were talking about this. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, Christians are never protected in any society these days. And we can push it even further. What if the dominant party then outlaws the competing party? What if your critiquing of the government gets considered to be hateful and dangerous for social cohesion? I mean, these are not far-fetched examples. They're examples that do happen currently today in some countries. And even some developed countries, like I say, like the UK, where if you so much as question immigration, or even the ludicrous fucking tranny-enabling practices we have these days, you are labeled a hateful extremist and arrested and tried for your thoughts. The cornerstone of democracy is free speech, period. There's no ifs or buts. And just like with any rights, there is going to be people using those rights for the wrong thing. Some people, if you're free to say what you want, will say mean shit or will say hateful stuff. And that's okay. You're welcome to engage with it and debate it, refute it, or you're welcome to disconnect from it and not engage with it and ignore it. But your solution should never be, I want to silence this person, because it's silencing them today and it might just be silencing you tomorrow. We've seen it on a different scale. This is not the same at all, but how the left for years called for, created cancel culture, right? If you so much as tweeted the wrong word 25 years ago, not 25, but like 10 years ago, they'll dig it, find it, and get you banished from society in general. And then all of a sudden, that very same cancel culture comes and bites them in the ass, and they're crying about it. They're crying about it. And I'm namely talking about the death of Charlie Kirk and how the left celebrated, made fun of, and cheered on his assassination. And then some people fought back and said, no, wait a second, perhaps your employer would love to know that that's how you view the death of someone. And plenty of people got fired for it, and they're denouncing it. Well, you're falling victim to a monster you've created. A monster, by the way, which you unleashed on a way more trivial crusade. And now that you're exercising your free speech, and I disagree deeply, I vehemently with making fun of anyone's death. I would not make fun of, some of the most hated politicians on the left's death. I would never cheer Trudeau's death. I would never do such a thing, because ultimately he's still a human and he still has kids and family and people that are not related to any of the bullshit he's doing that don't deserve to lose this guy. But again, my deeper inner belief in free speech says, you know what, if these assholes want to go on TikTok and on freaking YouTube or Instagram and put their face out there cheering for the death of someone, it's free speech. They should be allowed to do it. But hey, again, you've said it. It's not free from consequences. It's a monster you've created. Now we can apply that to speech as well. If these people, they're the first one to push, hate speech is not free speech. Hate speech is dangerous. I've had discussions with Germans because they have very strong hate speech laws over there too. And I tell them, don't you think it's a little fucked up that like I could say HH here in Canada? Again, I'm not condoning this, but I could say it here and not get arrested. But if I was to say such a thing in Germany, I would be arrested and tried criminally. They're like, yeah, but it's to prevent the rise of such a thing again. I'm like, but can't you see that eventually today it's that, and tomorrow it's just going to be the fact that you want a different party to go into office, and we're seeing it. The right-leaning party, AFP or AFD in Germany is now being litigated against and criminally investigated due to their views, because they are putting in jeopardy the established government order. Well, they're using their hate laws against a political party. Yes. And again, some people will say, yeah, but these guys are extreme. Okay, but that's today. Again, it goes from, if you're a Nazi, it's against you. Now it's, if you're a far right party, it's against you. Eventually it's, if you're a right party, it's against you. Then eventually if it's, you don't support the party, it's against you. It's
a sliding scale.
It leads to that. It really does. And it won't happen overnight. And that's what's insidious. It happens over decades or even sometimes generations, but it does lead to that.
My brother, I had a long conversation with an officer in the German Air Force. I'm not sure if I could say his name, but I know he's a viewer. So shout out to you, Jürgen. I see you, brother. We had a long conversation, and he was breaking down what's happening in Germany to me. And it's exactly what you just said. He said, what the Germans don't understand is they are sliding back towards Nazism, just on the other side. It's like they're coming in through the back door, right? And the AFD is not this. They're a reaction to it. They're not the Nazis. It's the other side that are the Nazis, and the AFD are just a reaction to it. Just like I said this in another podcast episode, but Charlie Kirk was a reaction to the woke cultural revolution. Charlie Kirk is a reaction to Justin Trudeau, essentially, right? If you want to use two figures to project this off of. So he was saying to me, he's like, Germany is going back toward Nazism, but they're doing it from the other side. And
Yeah.
now the AFD are being painted out as the Nazis, but they're not the Nazis. It's the opposition. It's the opposition to them. The AFD are just a reaction to this growing authoritarianism, right? And I was thinking about this Charlie Kirk situation because I was. It's funny you brought up Justin Trudeau, because when I was thinking about it, I was thinking of Justin Trudeau. I despise him as a human being more than any other political figure ever. I mean, in recent history, right? In Canadian history, for sure. And I was thinking about, what if it was Trudeau? What if that happened to Justin Trudeau? What would my reaction have been? And I was trying to put myself in the same position as the people who were celebrating Charlie Kirk's assassination. And I came to the conclusion that not on a Christian level, just on a human level, I wouldn't celebrate that. Just on a human level, for exactly what you just outlined. Like, he's a father still. He still has people who love him. Like his life, his public persona will always be defined by what he did to Canada and the agenda that he served. But on a human level, he's still a human, like he's still a person, right?
Yeah.
And like that, and then it struck me that, like, yeah, if this was like Ibram X. Kendi or any of the like leftist public figures who took a bullet to the throat at a public event, I really don't think the Christian conservatives would have been celebrating it. But that reaction to Charlie Kirk's assassination just is further proof of the spiritual decay that we've experienced culturally, right?
It's pushed me more towards wanting to start attending church than anything else, because, and I'll tell you why. When I started, and I started saving the videos of people celebrating, because I wanted to speak about it on the podcast and I wanted to bring it up on a podcast. And it's the first time that I looked at someone and thought, I think this is a literal demon. The joy, it's this deep, intrinsic, visceral joy at the death of someone. And they'll even say, fuck his kids, now they'll grow up without a father, and fuck his wife. And it's like, whoa, look, you can despise, again, to Charlie Kirk. That's fair, man. You don't believe in what he says. That's cool. I'm okay with that. Not a problem. You're allowed to debate anything he says. You're allowed to say he's an asshole too. I don't care. Even if I think it's a lie, you're allowed to say it. But to say that you want him to die and you're happy that his family will suffer, they're the same kind of people that when they disagree with you, they'll say, I hope you get cancer and die. And it's like, whoa, dude, like, what the fuck? They're the same kind of people that will call you a Nazi or a fascist because you just don't have the same view as them. You could be the most moderate centrist guy in the world, but because you don't believe that like there's more than two genders, you're all of a sudden a fucking fascist. But when you look at these people in the eyes, it's empty. There's like no soul. And it's made me question, is there such a thing as actual legit good versus evil? And then I realized, you know what? There are some good people. I watched the celebration of Charlie Kirk's life. I've watched the vigils. I've watched how peaceful and solemn all these strangers were around the world, in Calgary as well. I know you guys had some pretty big vigils up in Alberta as well. And then I contrasted it to, the BLMs of the past, the George Floyd deaths of the past, and all the martyrs that the left likes to say are martyrs, and the reaction from destruction, burning down the cities, killings, politicians calling out, we need to bring pain to them. These people are Nazis. I've seen people say, kill white men, kill white people. I mean, the most vile thing you can say. And I'm just realizing, it's beyond left versus right. It's just good versus evil. Mm-hmm. And if there's a good versus evil in this world, well, I believe that God is good. And as such, perhaps I need to start getting closer to him because of that, because it's a spiritual, I think it's deeper than societal. I think we're getting, to a spiritual war. It's the essence of human beings, people that are absolutely evil. I mean, you've also seen it with the death of Irina, that Ukrainian girl in the train in Charlotte, North Carolina. What shocked me the most is not even the fact that she was stabbed by this repeat offender scumbag. What shocked me the most is that there were 5 strangers around her, 5 bystanders, who watched her bleed to death and did nothing about it. And I get the bystander effect, I get the psychological part of it, but there's such a thing as like, okay, maybe I should help this person because I don't know, they tripped and spilled their coffee. And then there's this person's fucking bleeding to death, and you just look at it or film it or just like don't react. And again, it's just like, I'm sorry to say, but in a good society, perhaps a faith-based society, and this is unlike me to say, I would have never said this a year ago, but I believe people would have stood up and at least tried to render help. Because when you center your life around what's good and what's bad, good versus evil, well, you will always strive to do what's good, even when what's good is hard or scary. So, yeah, this entire Charlie Kirk thing, and by extension the arena thing, it all happened within a week, is kind of reigniting a little bit perhaps my questioning of faith in a good light.
Yeah, here I'll see. This is okay. I've spent a lot of time thinking. I've been writing an essay for like 2 years about this, and I can't get it right. And what I think is happening, man, is I think we are entering a hot spiritual war. Look, man, I was in the same place as you. I considered myself agnostic for a long time. I believed in a creator, but I just didn't know what role it played. And brother, God called me to this. I honestly, and I know this sounds crazy to non-believers. It would have sounded crazy to me. But what I'm seeing happening is a lot of people being called. I'm seeing Elliot Daigneault. I'm seeing just so many people being called back. And I think it's because God's building an army. Now, I was called, and I don't know why. I don't think I'm important or significant or I'm not Joe Rogan or anything, but maybe God called me because I need to bring in 3 warriors. Maybe God's calling Elliot Daigneault because you need to bring in 500 warriors. Maybe all of us are playing like a small role in this, but we're part of something greater, part of something bigger. That's the only thing that I can, dude, just going back to what I said earlier, like, dude, so many times in the last year, I'm like, I'm fucking done. Like, I'm not doing this anymore. I get called a Nazi. I get email. I've had death threats and whatever, man. If you got a problem with me, come see me, man. You figure out who the fuck I am real fast. But, the point is like, I've tried to stop so many times, and then I just keep my heart open to God. I keep letting the Spirit guide me, and the Spirit leads me right back here. Here I am again. So now I'm like at the stage where I'm like, fuck it, I'm not even going to try to stop, because I've tried so many times and I can't, and I think it's because God is calling the warriors. And again, it's not like we're going to be standing on the top of the, at the mountaintop holding Excalibur, I'm the one. I'm not Neo in the Matrix. There's a lot of us. There's millions of us, but we're all being called back. And I think it's just the ones that have their hearts open are the ones who are being called. And I have a hard time believing otherwise, because everything in my life just keeps leading me back to that we are being called, that there's some deeper spiritual war happening. And then you see it, like you said, like in the reaction to Charlie Kirk's assassination, you're looking at people who, I don't know if it's like a demonic thing or if it's just total emptiness, a complete lack of a connection to their creator. It's something, though. It's a lack of humanity. And maybe that humanity, what we often refer to as humanity, is actually the Spirit of God. And maybe it's a lack of a connection to the Spirit of God that is driving this hate and anger and sadness inside of them, right? And I don't think that, like, in this spiritual war, that these are people that need to be destroyed or need to be dealt with in any manner. I think what it is it's just that they are contributing to something that they don't even understand, an evil that we've never seen before, and that evil is starting to rear its head at us. So the light of God, the Spirit, is calling people like me and you and millions of us, not just us, right? And I think that's what's happening. I can't see a reason otherwise. You're right with that Ukrainian girl who was stabbed in Charlotte. I put myself there as a Christian, but as not even as a Christian, take that label away. Just as somebody who has a firm belief and connection to my God, I couldn't even if I lost my life in the process. And again, this is another thing that comes with a spiritual foundation, because I know if I lose my life in the process, I'm going to my creator. I know that, right? So I have less of a fear of interfering in a situation like that. And yeah, you're absolutely right. If she was surrounded by people who had some form of real spiritual foundation, not just a religious one, I'm talking about a real connection, they wouldn't have let that happen.
No, and she might still be here. I've watched and by the way, everything you said is so spot on. And honestly, I know it's fuck 2 years you've been working on that essay, but if one day you publish it,
I'm just trying to
please.
find the right way to articulate it. You know, what's been strange for me, man, is ever since God called me home, I have been so awestruck by the experience that I have not been able to put it into words.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And every time I try to
Yeah.
write it down, it's not right. It's just not right. So anyways,
You
please
feel like
go.
it doesn't do
It
justice
doesn't do it
to
justice.
yeah.
And the thing that I'm trying to convey to people is, you know, like, I'm not a recent convert. I always believed in a creator. I always had a thorough understanding of Christianity. I've always followed the laws and the teachings of Jesus Christ, but actually applying them to my life, like applying them. And what you learn, and again, I'm getting super enthusiastic here, so sorry everybody, I'm not going full evangelist on you, but when you actually read, so I'll just say this before we get to the next part of our conversation. I'm sorry I'm hijacking it, Elliot, but
No, it's okay, man. I love it.
when you read the Bible, the Old Testament reads like a blueprint for creating a civilization, right? And a lot of what you're reading there, was it divinely inspired? I don't know. That's questionable. How much of it is metaphor? How much of what you're reading is parable? I don't know. But when you open up the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and you read Jesus's words, they come alive. And it's strange because years ago, somebody said this to me, that there's a veil over Jesus's teachings, and you don't really get it until your heart is ready for it. And I always thought that that was just some religious gobbledygook bullshit, right? But it happened to me. When I read the Gospels, I was like, whoa, holy shit. Like, Jesus Christ isn't like this, you know, weak guy walking around, you know, taking, you know, punishment from everybody. He's a fucking rebel, dude. He's a warrior, brother. This guy is fearless. He is going
Mhm.
at the establishment head on,
Oh yeah.
to a point where they hang him from a cross and put a crown of thorns on his head and torture and humiliate him, right? But the point I'm trying to get at here is that once you really open your heart and read what Jesus said, it speaks volumes, brother. There's so much depth to it. And that's what I'm having a hard time encapsulating. You know what I mean?
And Tucker even said that too. He's like, when he was giving a speech at the Charlie Kirk Memorial, he said his favorite story happened a little bit over 2,000 years ago, and it
Yeah.
was someone who kept telling the truth. And it's dangerous to tell the truth, but he stood by it, and
Yeah.
they did what they did to him.
Yeah.
Um, he was relating it to Charlie Kirk. He was saying the truth, and they did. He never said who's they, but they did to him, the same thing they did to Jesus. They try to silence him.
And here, and the thing is look, when you read the Gospels and they speak to you, you know that Jesus was something else, because the things that
Hmm.
he's saying are just relevant today, and so much depth. I mean, from on a philosophical level, it's dumbfounding, right? But the way you know that Jesus was a real person is the way his story ends. If you're writing a hero story, your hero isn't humiliated, tortured, crucified, slapped with a crown of thorns on his head, and then hung from a cross, naked, by the way. The loincloth is added for, I guess, whatever, to make it less obscene in the view of
Hmm.
eyes of some people. Hung naked with a sign over him that says King of the Jews, mocked in his final moments, right? You don't write that story that way if you're writing a hero story, right? You don't write it that way. And I'm sorry, everybody, that I've gone off on a tangent here, but I just encourage everybody, just open the Gospels, just open Matthew, and read it, and really just have an open heart. Just look at it read it from a pure philosophical standpoint, even if you're not interested in the spiritual aspects of it. Just read what Jesus has to say. He is the ultimate rebel, brother. He went at the establishment relentlessly. His entire story, the way I explain him to people is Jesus's entire story, the crux of it, the underlying theme is a rebellion against the religious and political establishments of the time.
Yep, absolutely. And maybe that's what gives strength, maybe in the essence of it. And right now I'm being very esoteric, but maybe in the essence of it, people who are open to Jesus and to Christianity manage to tap, and without even realizing it, into the energy or the spirit of exactly that, being willing to stand up, to rebel, to fight back for truth, for justice, for what's right, irrespective of the cost associated to it. And maybe that's why, Christian-based societies have been, in my eyes, and maybe it's controversial, but some of the most successful, most free, most innovative, and most... Do
you know who the most successful immigrant class are in the world?
Go ahead, tell me.
Nigerians. Do you know why?
No way. I have no idea.
Christianity. They're Christians.
Huh.
I had a long conversation with one of my neighbors the other day. He's an economist. He's also a psychologist. He has 2 PhDs, right? And we were digging into the secrets to Nigerian success. And he said, "Do you want to know what the truth is, brother? It's the Lord. It's that we have Christianity as our base. It informs everything we do. Our priority of family and education over everything is rooted in Christianity."
Yeah.
Right? Now, it's not to say that all Nigerians are Christians, but their value system is based in that.
Right? But that's the thing, right? So that's the value system of Western civilization, is Christianity.
Yeah.
And exactly that. We've managed to accomplish, our ancestors and even our recent ancestors have accomplished so much, innovated, created a world free to an extent from tyranny. I mean, the reality is that you go back, you go back in time. Every civilization was under tyranny, or at least absolute control, whether it be through a monarch, whether it be through a chieftain, you name it. We've created freedom and given it to people and unleashed it and created the best civilization there ever was. And right now we're trying to go away from it and take away. We're trying to change our winning recipe. It's kind of weird, isn't it? Like, if it ain't broke, don't change it.
Yeah. And the thing is, going back to what you were talking about, manipulations, right? What's the best way to do that is manipulate people into believing God doesn't exist. And listen, for people listening to this, look, religion might not be your bag. It's not my bag at all. I've separated the religion and the rituals from my relationship with God, because religion has never been my thing, and it might be yours. That's fine. Right? We believe in the same thing, and we believe in a creator, and I follow the teachings of Jesus Christ very closely. I try to live as close to Jesus as humanly possible. Right now, I'm not him, right? Jesus is a 5-star spiritual war general. I'm just a infantryman at best. Right. So,
a faithful servant. Let's go with that.
But the thing is I'm taking orders from the best of the best. Right. And that's the way you have to look at it. I'm not a religious guy. The ritual stuff turns me off. I've been in churches many times where I'm surrounded by people that I know don't believe in God, or at least don't believe in the teachings of the Messiah that they claim to worship. Right.
But see, that's an interesting point for the people that are still on the fence or maybe very much against religion. You got to separate the institution from the scriptures and the teachings. Those are 2 different things. They can go hand in hand if you want them to.
Yes.
But you can explore and have your own relationship with God on your own and through the Bible and the scriptures and history, or you can do it through the institutions. But they're not one and the same. And I have some qualms, for example, with the way, like, I don't necessarily believe that there should be a pope.
Mhm.
it sounds maybe a little crazy, but like, I mean, isn't the whole thing like, okay, you're the successor of the disciple, but you know, it creates this authority figure, and it's like, do we need that? You know, some people think they do, some people don't. I'm not a big fan of the institution, but more and more, and again, I don't recognize myself saying this, but more and more I'm drawn back towards it. And all these events happening is enough. I think you and I are critical guys. We're logic driven, and we like to, you know, we're skeptics, but also we like to keep an open mind and ask the right questions and analyze things. And eventually you just have this reckoning. You see things happening and it just kind of hits you, and it leads back to some form of, you know, spiritual, like you said, an open conflict at this point, an open war. And then you got to question yourself, well, if there's two sides, if there's good versus evil, which side do I want to be on, and who is good? And then, you know what, that's when you start walking, taking that walk with God, and that's for you to have on your own. But
Yeah.
I encourage people to start looking within.
Yeah, yeah. Look, listen, just to Elliot, I know I've stolen like an hour and a half of your time, so I'll let you go soon. But just to sum it up, Jesus said, "I am the truth, the way, and the life." Now, Jesus wasn't talking about creating a religion in his name and creating churches in his name and worshiping him. You know, what he was talking about was follow my example. I am the truth. I am the way. I am the life. Follow me. I'm the general. You walk behind me. And what did Jesus do? What did he do? He challenged the religious establishments. The reason he is crucified is because he tells people, you don't need this stuff. You don't need the rituals and all this stuff. You don't need the Pope and all this garbage. You can talk to God directly, man. Like all this stuff is just noise. This is all worldly shit.
Mm-hmm.
You could just talk to God. Like, just do it. Just go. And exactly what you said. Once you start doing what you know is intuitively right, instinctively right, which is the voice of God, your instinct, your conscience is the voice of God. Once you start following that voice, you find that you're doing the right things. God is with you, man. It doesn't matter what you believe. God does not care what you believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Jesus was a messenger. He was a conduit for the Spirit, right?
Absolutely.
The
And he
greatest,
led by example. And that's the
exactly.
important thing. It was not about ego, and definitely not about ego. It was not about
No,
control and power compared to some other religion that I will not name right now, but it was all about, hey, I'm willing to lead by example, and if I must die for it, then
let's
it
go.
is so let's go. Let's go, baby. You know what I mean? And this to me, it reminds me of a principle, and you know, maybe that principle is based in Christianity, but in the Marine Corps, I'm not a Marine, I'm not a military man, but I know for a fact that officers are always, you know, at least instructed, officers eat last. You let your men eat first, you eat last, you lead by example, you know, you put others first. There's some serious parallel there to again, to Jesus, and
Yeah,
for that reason alone, that's to me worthy of untold levels of respect, because this was selfless.
exactly. Listen, the night before Jesus has died, he's on the Olive Mountain. He's talking to God and saying, you know, if you could take this burden off of me, please. Why is that important? Well, it's because it shows his humanity. It shows that even though he knows what's coming, he knows he's reached the end, right? That he has challenged the establishment to such an extent that they are now coming for him. He knows that. He's still asking God to get him out of the situation that he's in because he knows exactly how this is going to end, right? That's an important moment, right? Because Jesus being, aside from being, I mean, just the greatest figure humanity has ever known, is still, when push comes to shove, is having that fear and anxiety of knowing what's coming, right? And so, like, that's an important part of his story because we all experience those things, and that's how we relate to him, right? And so, anyways, guys, we turned this into a sermon. Wow.
I was not expecting that, but you know what? Let that be again a testament of what happened. Again, it's. I think the last few weeks have awoken a lot of people,
I think so too.
a lot of people, and hopefully that helps, like you say, whether it's an army being built by God, whether it's just, I think it's good versus evil, and there is evil at play. And dare I even say that some of our elected officials are probably evil as well. They're not looking for the best of their civilization, their society. They're looking for their own personal benefit or to serve some other power. Yeah. Maybe this is what's needed, and it will lead to a good outcome in the end. Let's go with that.
Yeah, I just think they're empty. And I think that's what it is. And I honestly, I really think that's what it is, brother. And, you know, I think, fuck, dude, I'm just so glad you're doing what you do. I love the right call. I love listening to everything you have to say, dude. Like, you know, I can't remember if I said this online or offline, but you and Payman Ascari are like my news, and Sam, obviously. But like, you guys are so invaluable to.
Well, I appreciate that. And this is why I told you, even though there's been a setback with the Right Call podcast, I'm not going to stop. I don't care. And it's hard, dude. Me too. I've had those like, oh, what's the fucking point? I'm just there rambling on a microphone. Nobody fucking cares ultimately. You know what, man? No, fuck it. We're going to keep going. And by the way, I do have to say, dude, when I saw, and this is why I reached out to you, when I saw your Elon's post quoting you, I was like, no effing way. And it's such an important post too. I think it applies to Canada so much, and it's such an important thing for people to be aware of. But tell me a little bit, like on your end, like I know we've run an hour and a half, maybe take another 10 minutes if you have the time.
I had to buy a new phone. Sorry, that's my wife, everybody. I had to buy a new phone.
No way.
Yeah.
So what happened? What, for people to know, I want to know, like, what's it like to have
it's so crazy.
Elon coach you?
It's so crazy because it's like, on one hand, like, he's just a dude, you know, like he's just a guy. It's just one person. But then you realize that, like, he's the most famous, wealthiest man on earth. Like, he's got something insane, like 400 million followers on X. He owns the platform. Dude, I was in the gym and I walked out and I reached into my bag and my phone was red hot. Like I could barely hold it. And I was like, what the fuck is going on? So I turned, dude, every notification that existed in my phone was going off. My phone was just constantly buzzing. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on? Right. So I'm like, I looked at my phone and I'm like, oh shit, Elon Musk like reposted me. And like, dude, like every platform was going insane on my phone. So I tried to shut off all my notifications, but then like other things were going off. Eventually it fucked up my phone. Like my phone,
wow.
My phone glitched out and went just like meltdown. Like, my phone was a few years old, so it was on its last legs anyways, right? That's why I ended up with this beautiful Google Pixel with my wife on the wallpaper. Yeah, dude, it was wild. It was like 5 days. People were calling me like I won this.
Wow.
People were calling me like, dude, what the fuck? I'm like, yo, like, it's weird. It's weird because it's like, he's just a guy on one hand, but on the other hand,
he commands respect.
I get the significance of it, right? Like, he's probably
huge.
Between him, Joe Rogan, and Trump are probably the three biggest cultural influences, right? And so,
but it's wild to think that like your words, your thoughts, your analysis, like a portion of your brain was transcribed into his brain,
poured it
because he read it,
and
then he reacted to it, and he thought, you know what, this is important enough that I think the world should know about it. That's huge, dude.
It's pretty wild, dude. Like, it was like 4 or 5 days of like literally people calling me, being like, "Whoa, bro," and I'm like, okay, like, I don't. Again, like, it's like, because I look at everything from a very realistic standpoint. Like, I'll be honest with you, I've had opportunities to have very, 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 very famous people on my podcast that I'm just not interested in talking to, so I don't do it. Like, anybody that you see on Brave New Normal is because I admire them and I want to talk to them and pick their brain on things. I mean, this is your third appearance, and like, dude, I listened to The Right Call. When The Right Call went on hiatus, I was like, fuck. Like, there goes an important part of my week, right? So, like, you know what I mean? Like, I was actually meaning to reach out to you because I couldn't figure out where Right Call went. And then you sent me a message saying, hey, dude, Elon, what the fuck, right? So it was like, So anybody that's on this podcast, I don't do anything for views. If I did, trust me, this podcast would be 10 times the size it is right now. I do it because these are conversations that I feel
Mhm.
people need to hear, people that I want to talk to, and I don't really give a fuck about anything else. I don't care about views and likes and all that bullshit. To me, it means nothing. To me, what matters is that what I'm creating is valuable to people somewhere, some way, right?
And it is, and I've told you this before, and I'll say it a million more times, but your writing is
Thanks, Doug.
insane. I mean, it is really a gift,
Thanks,
and I
brother.
love writing everything you do. And this clearly people do too, because on X, I mean, you got yourself a pretty good following on
Yeah, I
X.
mean it's the look, I'll say this, like I'm going, I've been like, dude, I've been on a tear lately with the writing. Like I have so much material. Like there's so much stuff coming on the way. And my Substack is growing, which is where like
Nice.
I try to centralize everything out of my Substack because that's where you can get the podcast and the writing. With X, what's difficult is I think that sometimes the essays that I post there kind of get lost in the, you know, the sludge of, you know, just
Yeah.
random thoughts, right? um but yeah, it's dude, I don't know, man. Dude, I've tried to stop doing this so many fucking times and God's just like, nope, puts me right
Don't
back where I
stop.
was again. Just,
Don't stop.
dude, you have no idea. Like I've like, bro, I've thought about going back to a cubicle. I thought about driving fucking a FedEx truck. I've been thinking about doing so many different things other than this, and God's just like, nope, picks me up, puts me right
Keep
back on the board. You know what I mean? And like,
keep going. There's so few of us, and I say us. I'm not a writer like you. I don't have any talent in writing, but so few people that are willing to stand up, to voice their opinion, to question things, and to put it out there. It's hard to be in the public eye. You know, it's
really
hard. Like
is.
you said, you get stopped sometimes by people who want to freaking insult you, which is wild. It's not easy. It takes a lot of guts, but Canada needs it, or else we're like the little last flame of resistance, if you wish, or maybe rationality in this fucking country. And if that dies, who's ever going to bring a counter narrative to CBC, to the government, to anyone? No one. It's over. We're done for. So
Well,
we
that's
got
why
to
you're
stick together.
that's why you're so important, dude. I'm just an idiot with a microphone. I'm a writer. I'm an editorial guy. I'm working on an essay right now about a lady who screamed "fuck you" in my face after a brief encounter because she realized who I was toward the end of our encounter. Oh, dude, I've been getting that. I get that. I've been, as the podcast grows, of course, I get more and more people just out of the blue. I get a lot of really cool people. Like I've had
Yeah,
so many circumstances where like I walk into a cafe and somebody there is a listener of the podcast and they're like, "Hey man, dude, I love what you do." But for whatever
that's
reason,
awesome.
it's the people who scream Nazi at you that stick out the most because it's you know,
That's how it is. Negative tends to stick more than positive, which sucks.
it
But that's
does. It
that's
really
just what.
sucks
Yeah.
because I wish like all of the like great interactions that I had like stayed with me forever, you know? But
Mhm.
anyways, the point is to get this off of away from me. The right call, dude. Like I feel like you are so fucking important to the discussion, to the conversation. And I'm so glad that you're pushing forward with Right Call and that you're trying new formats and things like that because dude, you are so valuable. And for people watching this, please look up the Right Call, follow Elliot on Instagram. He always posts like reels that like stuff that I'm like, when the fuck did that happen? You know, like you somehow are plugged into things that I'm like, when did that happen?
but
Why did that happen?
But
You
you know
know?
what? It gets sometimes, I'll be honest with you, it gets a lot. Sometimes I'm just like at the end of the day, and I don't know if you get, I'm sure you get that as a writer, because you know, it's different creativity, but it's still creativity. And I'm just there and I'm just like, how do I put these thoughts into words? Um how do I curate all the information coming on? It's like you're plugged into so many streams, you're being bombarded with information. You're like, holy fuck, I'm just a human. My head's gonna explode.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, you're also trying to like make a living, make some money, you know, take care of a family. It's like, holy fuck. So I think, you know, we definitely share, I'm sure, that human aspect of it. It's
Oh,
a
dude.
lot. And like,
Yeah.
you know, and like you're writing, you're like, fuck, how do I get the words right? How do I make sense of my ideas? And it's the hardest
Yeah.
thing. That's why, by the way, like good writers are so special. It's exactly that. It's being able to put your thoughts into concise, cohesive, coherent
Yeah.
words. Ooh, that's not easy.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so look, I'll just say the Right Call podcast. Yeah, so it's at the Right Call for on YouTube, on Spotify, on Instagram too. Now our account on Instagram is super tiny. We went from 11,000 followers down to like 550. If not, my personal page HRH_Elliot on Instagram and TikTok. It pains me to say I'm on TikTok as well, but it reaches a different audience. And you know what? I don't even have 200 followers on X. I am the shrimpiest of the shrimps on X. Don't know how the fuck you got like tens and tens and tens of thousands on X, because
Elon Musk.
nothing happens. Nothing happens to me on X. I'll post something and I'll get a like from this one account
Yeah.
that seems to be a spam account. No fucking idea. But I'm also on X. Everything is posted there, and sometimes I draw down some thoughts as well, although not nearly as eloquent in writing as you are, Jason. But yeah, so that's where people can find me if they find it interesting.
Yeah, listen, guys. Elliot is, not a floating head. You see those guys floating heads. This thing happened, and now I'm going to radicalize you some more. Elliot doesn't do that. He breaks down the facts. He does these really well-produced reels. They're fucking brilliant. He condenses like an entire article's worth of information into like a 1-minute reel or 2-minute reel that like lays it out. That's Elliot's talent. Elliot's talent is explaining the things that are happening. Elliot's role on the Right Call is he is the facts guy. He brings the data. He breaks it down for you. That's why the Right Call is such a great podcast. And please, guys, go through, follow Elliot on X, follow Right Call on Instagram, follow Right Call on YouTube. I mean it, man. Like in terms of the stuff that I watch, there's maybe 2 Canadian podcasts that I regularly watch. One is In Lay Terms and the other is The Right Call. And The Right Call is like, it's like a fucking news show. It really is. Like I know what's happening in the country because of The Right Call. So guys, follow Elliot, follow Right Call. Elliot, my brother,
I appreciate it.
Let's have you back soon. I know you're doing a soft reboot of The Right Call. So once you get everything back up and running, let's do another one of these.
It's always a pleasure being on, man. I love our conversations. So
Yeah,
anytime you want to have me on, I'm happy to be there.
All right. I'll see you next week.
Awesome.